Elvis Presley walked onto the Tonight Show stage, and something was wrong. At 39 years old, the king of rock and roll looked exhausted. Puffy face, slower movements, the famous charisma dimmed. Johnny Carson had interviewed Elvis once before, back in 1956, when Elvis was just starting out. 18 years later, here he was again. But this was a different Elvis. For 15 minutes, they talked about Vegas shows, new albums, the usual promotional material. Elvis smiled, told stories, hit all his marks. Then, Johnny asked a simple question. "Elvis, your fans want to know. Are you happy?" Elvis's smile disappeared. He looked down at his hands. And when he looked back up at Johnny, his eyes were filled with tears. What Elvis Presley revealed in the next 12 minutes about the ghost that haunted him every single day, about the promise he'd broken to the one person who mattered most, left Johnny Carson speechless and showed 18 million viewers that even kings can be broken by grief. It was a Thursday night at NBC Studio One in Burbank. The air was thick with anticipation. Elvis Presley was scheduled, a rare TV appearance for a man who'd spent the last decade mostly performing in Las Vegas. Elvis didn't do many talk shows anymore. He preferred the controlled environment of concerts where he could perform without having to answer questions about his personal life, his health, his struggles. But his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had convinced him that a Tonight Show appearance would be good for his image, good for record sales, good for the upcoming tour. So here was Elvis walking onto the stage to thunderous applause. But Johnny Carson, who'd been reading people for 20 years, saw something immediately. Elvis wasn't well. Not just physically, though that was obvious. The weight gain, the labored breathing, the slight unsteadiness in his walk. But emotionally. There was something in Elvis's eyes that Johnny recognized. Exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying something too heavy for too long. They started with safe topics. Elvis talked about his upcoming Vegas shows. He told a funny story about learning karate. He mentioned his daughter Lisa Marie, who was 6 years old. The audience laughed at all the right moments. Elvis smiled, signed an autograph for a fan in the front row, seemed to be enjoying himself. But Johnny kept watching, kept noticing the moments between the smiles when Elvis's face would go blank, when he'd drift somewhere else mentally. 15 minutes into the interview, Johnny decided to go off script. "Elvis," Johnny said gently, "your fans want to know, are you happy?" It was a simple question, an honest question. Elvis's smile disappeared. He looked down at his hands, which were fidgeting with his ring, a gold band he always wore. The audience went quiet, sensing the shift. When Elvis looked back up at Johnny, his eyes were filled with tears. "Can I be honest with you, Johnny?" Elvis asked, his voice breaking. "Of course," Johnny said softly. Elvis took a breath. "No," he said, "I'm not happy. I haven't been happy in a long time." Before we go deeper into what Elvis confessed, the promise he broke, the mother he lost, the grief that defined everything that came after. If you're here because you remember when Elvis Presley showed the world that fame can't heal a broken heart, subscribe to Johnny Carson Legacy Stories. We're uncovering the moments when legends stopped performing and started grieving. Hit that. The studio was completely silent now. Johnny leaned forward. "What's making you unhappy, Elvis?" Elvis wiped his eyes. "My mama. She's been gone for 16 years, and I still can't get over it." His voice cracked. "I think about her every single day. Every show I do, every record I make, every time I look at my daughter, I think, Mama should be here. She should have gotten to see all of this." The audience was transfixed. This wasn't the Elvis Presley they knew. This was someone completely different, raw, vulnerable, broken. "Tell me about her," Johnny said gently. Elvis's face softened slightly. Gladys Presley. She was my whole world, Johnny. My daddy. He was around, but Mama was the one who believed in me. When I was nobody, when we were living in a 2-room house in Tupelo with no money, she told me I was special. She told me I was going to do great things. He paused, lost in memory. We had a bond that, I don't know how to explain it. We could finish each other's sentences. She knew what I was thinking before I said it. When I got my first guitar, she scraped together the money even though we could barely afford food. She believed in me when nobody else did. Elvis's voice grew thick with emotion. And then I made it. I became famous. I bought her a house, a mansion in Memphis. I bought her cars, jewelry, everything she'd never had. I thought, finally Mama gets to live like a queen. Finally she doesn't have to worry. He wiped his eyes again. But the fame, it destroyed her, Johnny. She hated it. She hated the crowds, the photographers, the fans screaming outside our house. She couldn't go to the grocery store without being mobbed. She couldn't have a normal life. Elvis's hands were shaking now. And she started drinking, to cope, to deal with the stress. And I was too busy touring, making movies, being Elvis Presley to see what was happening. I was so focused on my career that I didn't notice my mama was falling apart. Johnny's eyes were wet. He didn't interrupt. He just let Elvis talk. August 14th, 1958, Elvis said. I was in the army, stationed in Germany. I got a call that Mama was sick, heart failure. I flew home as fast as I could. But by the time I got there, his voice broke completely. She was gone. She was 46 years old. And the last thing I said to her before I left for Germany was, I'll be back soon, Mama, don't worry. But I wasn't back soon enough. Elvis was crying openly now, not trying to hide it. The king of rock and roll, crying on national television. I made her a promise when I was a kid, Elvis said. I promised her that when I made it big, I'd take care of her. I'd make her life easy. I'd make her happy. He looked directly at Johnny. But I didn't keep that promise. I gave her money, I gave her things, but I didn't give her what she really needed. Peace, quiet, her son's time. And now she's gone, and I can't fix it. I can't go back and choose her over a tour. I can't go back and stay home instead of making another movie. Elvis's voice dropped to almost a whisper. So no, Johnny, I'm not happy. Because every success I have feels hollow without her here to share it. Every standing ovation reminds me that the one person I wanted to impress the most never got to see me at my peak. The audience was crying. Not just a few people, everyone. The camera operators, the band. Ed McMahon had his head in his hands. Johnny stood up and walked over to the couch. He sat down next to Elvis. Elvis, Johnny said softly, your mother saw you succeed. She saw you become famous. She saw you change the world with your music. She knew you kept your promise. Elvis shook his head. But she wasn't happy. She was proud, Johnny interrupted gently. There's a difference. She might have struggled with the fame, but she was proud of you. I guarantee it. If you're feeling what just happened, the weight of a promise that can never be fully kept, the grief that doesn't end, you're exactly where we want you. Subscribe now. Elvis wiped his face. How do you know that? Because I'm a parent too, Johnny said. And I know that parents don't measure success by how much money their kids make or how famous they become. They measure it by knowing their kids are trying their best. And your mother knew you were trying. Elvis nodded, but the pain in his eyes didn't fade. The worst part, Elvis said, is that I became exactly what killed her. The fame, the pressure, the constant performance. I'm trapped in it now just like she was, and I don't know how to get out. Johnny was quiet for a moment. Have you thought about taking a break? Johnny asked. Stepping away for a while? Elvis laughed bitterly. I can't. I have contracts, tour dates. The Colonel has everything scheduled for the next 2 years. And even if I could stop, I don't know who I am without this, without being Elvis. You're the son Gladys Presley was proud of, Johnny said. That's who you are. Elvis's face crumpled. He put his head in his hands and sobbed. Johnny put his arm around Elvis's shoulder and just let him cry. For 30 seconds, an eternity on television, Johnny Carson held Elvis Presley while he grieved for the mother he lost 16 years ago. The audience sat in respectful silence. No one moved. No one spoke. When Elvis finally composed himself, he looked at Johnny. Thank you, Elvis said, for letting me say that, for letting me be honest. Anytime, Johnny said. After the show, Johnny and Elvis talked privately in Johnny's dressing room for over an hour. I meant what I said out there, Johnny told him. You need to take care of yourself, not for your fans, not for the Colonel, for you." "I know," Elvis said. "I know I do, but it's hard to break the cycle." "Then start small," Johnny said. "One day off, one weekend with Lisa Marie, one moment where you're not Elvis Presley, you're just a dad, just a man." Elvis nodded. "I'll try." But Johnny could see in Elvis's eyes that he didn't believe it was possible. 3 years later, on August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died at Graceland. He was 42 years old. The official cause was heart failure, the same thing that killed his mother. At Elvis's funeral, Johnny Carson sent a private letter to Elvis's family. It was read aloud at a small gathering after the public service. "Elvis Presley told me once that he wasn't happy," Johnny's letter said, "that he'd been carrying grief for 16 years and didn't know how to put it down. I told him his mother was proud of him. I hope he believed me. I hope, wherever he is now, he's with Gladys again. And I hope he finally feels the peace he was searching for." Years later, in a 1985 interview, Johnny was asked about the most emotional moment in Tonight Show history. "When Elvis Presley cried about his mother," Johnny said without hesitation, "because in that moment, he wasn't the king of rock and roll. He was just a son who missed his mom. And that's something everyone can understand." He paused. "Elvis taught me that grief doesn't have an expiration date, that success doesn't heal old wounds, and that sometimes the people who seem the strongest are carrying the heaviest pain." May 12, 1974. Johnny Carson asked Elvis Presley if he was happy, and Elvis Presley, the king, the legend, the icon, said no. Because 16 years after his mother died, he was still the boy from Tupelo who just wanted to make Gladys proud, and no amount of fame could fill the hole she left behind. If this story reminded you that grief doesn't end, keep this channel close. There are more moments like this, moments when legends showed us their broken hearts. Comment below, have you ever carried grief that wouldn't let go? Because on May 12, 1974, Elvis Presley showed 18 million people that you can have everything and still feel empty. And sometimes the promise we can't keep haunts us the most.